Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Buddy Manning here. Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the Garden Report after the third of four. I didn't know there was a fourth, Justin, and I'm glad we have one. Celtics-Cavs game coming up later this month. But the Celtics took the lead in the season series in what I would say fairly decisive fashion. I feel like for much of this game, they dominated the Cavs defensively. Cleveland did miss a lot of shots, especially early in a 15-point first quarter that pretty much derailed them for the rest of the night. Now, the Cavs shot back throughout, brought to like 4 late, and had a real chance to strike with one last run. That Mitchell pull-up during transition, I think, really was the moment where if that fell, they might have had a chance. And after that, Celtics, rebuilt their lead and slammed the door in this one. Justin, Chase Down podcast. I have mixed feelings coming out of this one, Justin. I'm obviously just generally a little disappointed with how the quality of the game went. But as I think it through, obviously no Okoro, no Wade, those guys will be important if they can get back. I still think this is probably close-ish to what we would see in a series like this. Cavs competing, keeping it close, keeping it competitive, but the shooting of Boston, the offensive firepower of Boston, just a little too much for them, especially with the offensive versatility. And, even on a night where Tatum's struggling, Brown being able to do his thing and giving them an edge there that they were able to maintain for the rest of the night. What were your thoughts coming out of this one?
Yeah, I largely agree with that. I think, in the first 2 games, when the Cavs made their run and had a chance to win them, and obviously they won the second game without Brown and White playing. But I thought in those ones, it was almost a more legitimate run. I thought Celtics maybe took their foot off the gas a little bit in this one. And, they missed some shots. Porzingis had some of those kind of mid-range shots that he typically hits at a higher volume that he missed. But I largely agree, man. Like, I think there was a reason Boston was favored coming into this game. We've been pretty consistent all season long that, even when Cleveland was sitting there with a 7-game lead in the East, we said, Boston's going to be favored in the series. They should be favored. They are, until proven otherwise, this is the best team. And what you mentioned with Wade and Okoro being out, I think that is obviously a factor. But I think some of the issues that the Cavs have had in this game are going to be present regardless of whether or not those guys are playing, right? Like, I think to some extent, being able to have Dean Wade, who is a very strong defender, being able to have him as your third big rather than George Niang, who I think Boston targeted pretty heavily in those minutes, I think that obviously, helps things. Having Isaac Okoro, who's your best perimeter defender, rather than Sam Merrill, that's going to help things, right? So I think that that's a factor, but I do think that there's trends here. I think what Porzingis is able to do with his interior defense bothers them. I think it bothers Evan Mobley. I think you've seen Mitchell and Garland rush some of their shots on the interior. I think that is something that the Cavs have to self-scout and find ways to, how are we able to attack this in an effective way? Because that's a legitimate issue, man. Like, I don't think that can be simply explained by, we're missing guys or whatever the case may be. I think, there are obvious matchup advantages with Boston, and I still believe Cleveland would have a chance to win a series, but the reality is, like, they're going to have a way smaller margin for error than Boston. Boston is going to be favored. They should be favored. And I think, we saw last night, when they are motivated, when they want to flip the switch and give that, that championship level effort, they're still, that kind of team that, is going to have probably be the favorite to repeat as champion.
So a couple pros. I feel like Jared Allen gave Porzingis some trouble at times. Obviously, an 18 rebound game. I think the physicality inside there would bother Porzingis in a series a little bit. So, that's a pro going for Cleveland. Mitchell being Mitchell, and even a little better than what we saw yesterday, would be a big factor. And you started getting nightmares if you're a Celtics fan of that run in the fourth quarter there, where he's just charging down the floor every time, making stuff happen. And that's what he can do. So that's going to keep them in most games, just Mitchell being Mitchell. And obviously, I think at full strength, the wing versatility, with Jerome, with Strus back, who wasn't good in this game. He's got to be better, and you got to have Wade back. You got to have Okoro back doing the Okoro things he was doing earlier in the year, and he had a great start to the year. So I like the wing versatility better here. And obviously the coaching, the style, the movement. I still feel like in a game where they just shot horrendously, you saw a lot of that from the Cavs here. The downside, Mobley, just a brutal showing. And this is still a matchup with him where you're like, the Horford thing, can he get past that? The offense, is he going to be able to get to it, find it? So many shots in this game, and I know you want to see him develop the three and have that shot in his arsenal, but every time he takes that, Boston's like, yes.
Yes.
We'll
especially right now, right? Like Chris Fedor was saying yesterday morning, prior to the game, that Evan Mobley's calf is still not at 100%. I think ever since he's come back from that calf injury, the shot has been flat. Even one of those pull-ups, he had a little bit of a hitch in there. That was something that wasn't there, earlier this season. So I do think he is still working his way back. I think they said he's around, like that 80-90% from a physical standpoint. And I thought where that was really evident was that play where Drew kind of backed him down. When you don't have your base, when you don't have that strength, within the leg, that's going to be a little more present. But I don't want that to be, kind of the main takeaway here, because he has had issues in this matchup before. He has struggled with his efficiency against Al Horford, against Kristaps Porzingis. And, that self-scouting that I was kind of referring to before, I think that's something that he's going to need to do here. I think, having an understanding of what you can and can't do. I thought he forced some shots. I think there are some things he could learn from how Jared Allen attacked Boston, in particular, his ability to use the rim to kind of defend, to help shield the ball when he's going up, quickly putting it up off the glass rather than, the normal takes he's able to do. He's able to finish over a lot of people. You can't do that against Kristaps Porzingis. So I do think, that's the biggest question for me, because as much as having Wade and Okoro back would help, Evan Mobley needs to be very good for Cleveland to have a chance in this series. And this is a tough matchup for him. And, when you have an offense structured around two smaller guards, you need to have that front court creator to have a chance to beat playoff defenses. If Evan Mobley's not ready to be that yet, they're not going to have a chance to win the series.
Yeah, and the Porzingis difference was big. I'm trying to remember. Was he in the second game?
He was.
Definitely wasn't in the first game. So, yeah, and that's been a major difference for Boston, him being himself, defensively having him as rim protection. You saw the couple blocks he had early. Mitchell got him, on the play of the game with the dunk. And
Mitchell doesn't even attempt dunks this year. Like that was surprising. He's clearly been taking a conservative approach to this season. Playing below the rim. But you could tell with this being a larger matchup, he went back to his old ways there.
Yeah, and the only other thing I had on my list on the Cleveland side was Garland, who I think was fine. But he did take that hit that was a scary one, like almost reminiscent of last year, where you're like, and then he got shaken up for a few minutes. And he finished strong like later in the game, but after that, it did feel like he was kind of taken out of the action a little bit.
He was very clearly like too worked up. And that was something we talked about after the first game in Boston, where, sometimes when Darius misses some shots, like he's had games where he'll start off 1 of 7, and then by the end of the night, he's a 50% shooter. Against Boston, sometimes that felt like that hasn't been the case, where, he misses a couple shots and then he starts pressing. He starts rushing the decisions. So I was actually really encouraged by this game, because after he took that shot of the face, I think there was some blood there. Like he was way too worked up. Those floaters that he's, one of the best in the league at finishing, those should be there for him. Like that should be, kind of a go-to move. And I think he finished those well in the second half, but he was putting those off the back of the rim. Like you could tell he was a little too fired up and he had to calm back down. So it's actually really encouraging for me to see him go from, all right, something didn't go your way. You're frustrated that, Boston is throwing elbows or whatever the case may be. And you let that impact your game, but you bounce back. You showed some strength, you showed some mental toughness there and managed to salvage it into, being a more or less okay game. That's probably like Boston's going to make you have tough shooting nights. You're especially as a guard, like you're going to have some games where it's not going your way, but to at least rally it to where, it's an okay game rather than a terrible game. Like that probably was the difference in that first game in Boston. If Darius just has like an okay game, they probably have enough to win that one. So I was actually encouraged by that with him. For me, the biggest takeaways were how Mobley just couldn't get on track. I don't know. I believe he's going to play tonight against Detroit. I think the All-Star break is going to do him some good with that calf, but they've taken a really cautious approach in bringing him back slowly and managing the minutes and whatnot. But the lack of options from a rotation standpoint when both Dean Wade and Isaac Okoro are out really made things tough. Because I think, some people in Cleveland advocate for starting Wade. I have been in the camp of that's not the right decision. I think from a lineup data standpoint, it's been very clear.
It's going to be such a hard choice. Even in a series like this, it's almost like you're just going to be switching different options, trying to see what works.
Yeah, but here's why I like him coming in off the bench. One, you have optionality from a rotation standpoint where, he plays his best. The net rating is at the best when he's at power forward, and you can stagger him with Mobley and Allen. He can give you someone that can protect the rim. He can defend in space. He does a good job on Jason Tatum. He has good length at 6'10". If he is starting, you don't have that optionality. You have to go to George Niang as that third big sub. And this is a very, very tough matchup for George Niang.
And the bench lineups were a underrated difference in this game. The Celtics just smoked the Cavs in those.
There was a 5-minute stretch. The lineup of Ty Jerome, Donovan Mitchell, Karis LeVert, George Niang, and Evan Mobley played 5 minutes. They were outscored by 14. Like that was more or less the game, right? Like that put them in a hole that they just couldn't recover from. So I think having that optionality really matters. And, even just from a lineup data standpoint, like I think sometimes people get so measuring tape obsessed where they're like, yeah, Dean Wade is 6'10", so he should be the starter for the Cavs. They're too small or whatever. But you look at the cleaning the glass data. The starting lineup or the core four with Wade, +5 net rating. With Okoro, +10. With Karis, +23. With Max, +20, almost +30. Almost a +30 net rating with Max. Like he has been the best option for them. Even in, the game last night where I thought he was hesitant. He wasn't taking threes. He didn't play well. Mobley didn't play well. Even with that, the starting lineup outscored Boston by 6 for the game. Like that wasn't where they lost the game, right? So I think at least having the optionality of Wade coming in off the bench and potentially being the closing option at the 3, I think that is probably the best way for the Cavs to approach things, assuming we don't see a move at the deadline.
Yeah, and they did limit Tatum more or less. They did get Brown into foul trouble and take him out of that fourth quarter, Brown rather. And those are wins in a game like this, along with the starting lineup when he mentions that you mentioned there. You also mentioned Garland being a little jacked up. I feel like I saw that across the board from the Cavs for the most part here. Like it did look like they were just coming out throwing crazy swings and shots missed, and what were they, like 2 of 17 or something, 2 of 19 to open this game? It was ridiculous just how poorly they started.
Yeah, it's been a consistent trend with this. I think they get too fired up and it takes them almost a half to settle in against Boston, and you can't do that, man. Like I think that's maybe one of those spots where the immaturity and the lack of championship experience is really coming through with these guys. They've done really well in these national TV games overall this season. But against Boston, it feels like it takes them a half to settle in. And I don't know if playing, the remains of the Dallas Mavericks and whooping them by 43 in the previous game just kind of had them, out of sharpness. But I do think, that's one of those spots where the inexperience matters. And, I think this game really shows you, one, how important it is for the Cavs to get home court advantage. Because I think no matter what, Boston's going to win a game in Cleveland. You're going to have any chance of winning a series against Boston or competing, You need to have home court, because if you don't have home court and we are assuming that Boston's going to win a game on the road, you are not winning 2 games in Boston. Like, that is simply not happening. So Cleveland has
That's
to
the
be
scary part right now. And I guess we can talk about that now because I want to bring it up at some point. But Celtics take the 2 or 3. Celtics move 4.5 back. It's still a sizable advantage for the Cavs, especially if they can get back on like a 65-70% winning percentage the rest of the way. They're probably not going to do what they did to start the year, but a good winning percentage might be able to hold up the Celtics if they have some ups and downs still. Though, fully healthy, Celtics starting to look more like themselves. I don't know if that's going to be a factor. We talked about it quite a bit after the game the other night. Tatum, White, all of them, Joe, like, they don't really care. And that's probably the right answer, that it doesn't matter.
It shouldn't be a factor for Boston. They're phenomenal on the road, man. Like, it is only a factor for Cleveland. It is only a factor.
Yeah, I was going to say, does it matter for Cleveland?
I think it matters, but I don't think they are going to make rotation decisions to chase it. Like, they have kept guys out, a week longer than they probably need to out of caution. They play Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland. Like, all those guys are at like 28, 29, 30 minutes per game. The regular season wins are just a byproduct of their approach, right? Like, it's just a byproduct of the talent on this team, but they are not chasing wins. And I expect that to continue to be the case. So, maybe if they get a little healthier here, they've been banged up for a while. They can continue this approach. But I do think, even if they're not chasing wins, I do think it's really, really important, because Boston is the better team. They're going to need to have every kind of advantage outside of that possible.
I think it's going to be more so from the Celtics perspective, and this is what we said the other night. The cumulative effect of New York, is probably a 2-3. Cleveland on the road, going through that path, and then whether it's Oklahoma or whatever else it would be on the road in the finals, like, that could all add up and prevent them from winning a title. For Cleveland, I think it's avoiding New York round 2 and having Boston go through that gauntlet.
Respectfully, I don't think it's a gauntlet for either team. The
New
Knicks
York?
are 11. The Knicks are 11-11 versus teams with a winning record. I think people are still thinking of the Knicks as this super physical team that's going to get those second possessions and all that.
We'll see what's left of them by playoff time. That's for sure.
They don't play that style, man. Like, that's the thing. They moved all the players. Like, when the Cavs lost to them, it was, okay, you have 48 minutes of Mitchell Robinson getting second possessions, and Isaiah Hartenstein was out there when he wasn't, right? You have consistent rim pressure, right? Like, Quickly's going to get to the rim. Brunson's going to get to the rim. RJ Barrett was getting to the rim. RJ Barrett had a great series. They don't have that style anymore. Jalen Brunson is kind of the sole creator for them. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are 2 of the worst isolation players in the league over the last few years. Like, they are not effective in those spots. And Karl Anthony Towns has had his struggles in the playoffs too. I just do not think they are going to be a gauntlet for a team like Milwaukee, or honestly for Cleveland. Like, I think sorry, not Milwaukee, Boston. I think Boston would beat them in 5. I think Boston would beat them in 5, maybe even 4. I think that their offense is good enough to maybe get one. Boston tends, especially since Porzingis has been back, Boston tends to give up a lot of open threes. So maybe they get hot and take a game, but I just don't think that that's going to be some physically taxing series that really, puts Boston in a tough position.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a good gauge for that matchup yet. They played on opening night. Tatum hit like 11 threes, and that was the ball game. So
you're not learning a lot from that one. That's an outlier game, even though we know, Boston is elite offensively.
Yeah, and that was like a high that they've steadily declined from, starting to climb back up a little bit with the shooting there. I do want to talk about the Celtics and where you're at on them right after we hear from Game Time. Big game in Boston tomorrow, potentially Anthony Davis's debut with the Dallas Mavericks. He is upgraded to questionable tomorrow, and all your tickets are available over on Game Time.
This episode is also powered by Game Time,
the best place to get tickets to the games, events, and concerts you want to see. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Game Time is filled with terrific features like all-in pricing, so you know exactly how much you're paying. No surprise fees at checkout. You also get panoramic views from your seats in the app, so you know exactly what you'll be looking at before you buy. Plus, a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Once again, download that Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. What time is it? It's game time.
There you go. Game Time. Check them out. CLNS, $20 off your first purchase over there, of course. Terms apply. Celtics back in the Garden on Thursday. They're heading out again after that. So if you want to catch them this week, tomorrow is the night. So check them out. CLNS, $20 off your first purchase over there. Celtics, 4 straight. They haven't done that in a while. I think it's been since November. They've been win-loss for a while. I think like 20 games or so. They were on a 500 stretch. And so health here, a factor. You knew coming into this game, full version of themselves is going to be tough to beat. Porzingis has regained form, maybe even looked better at certain points. He shot 50% from 3 in January, which was just ridiculous. He wasn't on offensively in this game. So that's probably scary for Cleveland too, that he could be even better and Tatum could be even better. And, this is still the result here. I'm getting more confident in them because I was concerned, Justin. I think it got to a point where it wasn't.
Here's the thing. I shamed you last year that you shouldn't be concerned that they were going to win a championship. You worry too much, my friend. You worry too much. And you know what? I see myself in
20 games.
What?
20 games, losses to the Hawks, losses to Sacramento, 5 more losses on their home court than they had a year ago.
Dude,
like, was it just boredom? You've been through this, so I will.
Here's the thing. It's not boredom, man. Like, it's an understanding of, all right, like, we're not going to kill ourselves trying to win regular season games. A lot of us had all of us had very long summers. Some of us had even longer summers coming off the Olympics. Like, when I came into the season saying that the Cavs had a chance to get the 1 seed, this was my calculus. It wasn't, I think Boston's fallen off. It's, hey, this is probably a team that's going to be a little fatigued. They are one of the best road teams in the league, one of the best road playoff teams in the league. They don't need to make short-term decisions in terms of, guys are manning up, let's rest them. Human nature of, hey, we all sacrificed a lot last year. Over an 82 game season, maybe some games I'm just going to feel myself a little bit, and you get some lazier isolation play, right? And I think you saw that with the isolation rate going up for Boston at times this year. I just don't think it means anything, man. Like, this is a team that knows how to win. This is a team with a lot of veterans. This is a team that can turn it on. And I think, like, when you saw the effort level from Boston, particularly on the defensive end to start this game, it's okay. Like, they recognize that the Cavs are ahead of them in the standings, and they wanted to make a bit of a statement. They can flip that switch. They can turn it on. I wouldn't start worrying about Boston's ability to flip the switch unless they were down, 2 games in a playoff series, and it just, like, they haven't shown up in any of them. Like, I fully believe in this team still. As I said, I do think that the Cavs have a chance to win. It's just going to come down to how prepared can they get by, I guess, mid-May. How much better can Evan Mobley get by then? How much can they reduce their margin for error and hope that, they can bait Boston into some of their worst tendencies, or take advantage of a lucky break or two if it goes their way? Like, for a lot of teams, like, that should be your approach, right? Become the best version of yourself as possible. And if a lucky break comes your way, or if someone, another team cracks the door open for you, you can take advantage of that.
So the differentiator for them many nights last year, if shots weren't falling, great offensive rebounding team in spots, and defensively they were awesome a year ago. They found that intensity and connectivity and Holiday's impact and all of that, Porzingis inside. So that was a real weapon for them. And if that's what you're not going to kill yourself with in regular season games, you understand that. The shooting to me was where I got a little concerned. Guys across the board having worse shooting years on a team that is a shooting team that relies on its shooting, maybe doesn't live and die by the three, but is pretty reliant on it. And this wasn't a great shooting game for them. They find a way to win with the defense and the rebounding and all that. I'm still keeping a close eye on it. I think they're 8th or 9th in shooting to begin this month, so they're coming out of that a little bit. But Holiday, not quite the same guy from 3 this year. Brown down a little bit. Tatum down a little bit. Horford down considerably. Porzingis, climbing out of some early struggles after coming back there. But that to me is going to be what I look at and say, all right, it's not just about boredom or, whatever else we'll throw around here with a defending championship team or other teams emerging like Cleveland. Are the Celtics going to be the same from a shooting standpoint this time around? And the one thing they have here in Cleveland, even without the great possession, without the great percentage here, is just how many they can generate. And I know Matt Moore tweeted this out during the game that the Cavs have prevented 3-point attempts from teams across the board this year, and they just can't figure out how to do it with the Celtics because it's second nature for Boston being able to get up 50. Like, they don't even have to think about it. They're all pretty good looks. They're all coming from good shooters generally here. And Derek White, after the 2 free throw misses there and a slow start in this game, just comes out and hits a couple late, and it's like, oop, Celtics win. So they always have that in their arsenal, but is it always going to be there for them is my question.
Yeah, and here comes, one of my big frustrations with this is, because the Cavs, like, that first game in Boston, they were missing every single wing player they had, right? Like, they were missing, Strus.
It was hard to draw from those first 2 games.
Okoro, Wade, like, every single small forward on the roster was out, right? Or shooting guard, whatever you want to call it. They were all out. Wade hasn't played for a single one of these games. Okoro has missed, I believe, 2 of them, maybe 3. So I do think
Strus is out the first 2 as well.
Yeah. So I do think, when you talk about the Cavs' ability to suppress threes for the season, a large part of that is, their 2 best perimeter defenders in Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade. The fact that they haven't been in both of these games, I'm not saying that they would be able to suppress Boston from getting those shots up, but we don't have data on it, which is frustrating from my standpoint, because what I'd like to learn is, okay, when you do have a full rotation, what does Kenny Atkinson go to? Can he trust Isaac Okoro? Can Isaac Okoro establish trust? Shooting well enough and doing, the other things that he's been doing this season to justify being on the court so that you can access his defense. Not having, that sample size is really frustrating. I hope that they're available for that, game at the end of February. But even then, like, you're not going to learn a whole lot about a one game sample. But I do think when you talk about, okay, the Cavs struggle to, suppress those Boston threes, I think a large part of it is, they were starting Sam Merrill in that game in Boston. You are playing a lot of George Niang. You are playing a lot of Ty Jerome, right? Like, you're putting guys out there and even forced to go to zone as a result of the personnel you have available, where Boston's going to be able to generate shots against that, right? So I think that is at least something that I'm keeping an eye on. My suspicion is Boston's still going to be able to generate looks, but how much does it decrease, right? Like, even if it's a 5 to 10% difference in terms of how the frequency of their wide open looks, what does that do to kind of the complexion of game? It's just one of those interesting things I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, definitely. And when Cleveland, to get to 39, it's, 14 tough ones from Mitchell, 4 Mobley ones that you probably don't love.
Yeah, the Mobley ones,
the greatest shooter. It's
I
the biggest.
I thought Mobley rushed his decision making. Like, the Cavs got 15 wide open threes where no Celtic was within 6 feet of them. They shot 29% on those. Like, that, you would kind of hope that would be a little bit better. But Boston reduced the number of open looks that Cavs get, right? Like, that's the shot suppression on that side. And
they're so good at controlling that.
They are at times. Like, last year they weren't, right? Like, last year they gave up, I think, the most wide open threes in the league. It's fallen off a little bit with Porzingis. Like, I do remember going from playing Orlando to playing Boston. It was like, oh my God, like this Cavs offense actually has room to breathe, which probably, is a reflection of just how aggressive someone like Jalen Suggs is as a defender and just how much length and physicality Orlando has on the defensive end. But, Boston is able to, throw elite guard defenders at every position. I want to get your thoughts on my pet theory when Boston was struggling, because I was looking at, the rate of isolation going up for Boston year
It's
over
high.
year. The frequency of their three-pointers going up. I was sitting there and I was like, did they take what they were best at and just over-index on it a hair? And ultimately, it's a tiring style of play because, like, what they're going to do is they're going to mismatch hunt on every single possession, right? Like, let's run an action, let's get a switch, and now Tatum or Brown's going to go one-on-one with Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell or whatever matchup they're hunting on a particular possession. If you are constantly just playing mismatch ball and you're not getting easier looks off of movement and stuff, or at least mixing that in, that's like a really tiring style to play in the regular season. And that was one of my pet theories of, in order to execute at a really high level and play that style throughout a regular season, like you just have to have a motivation to do that. That probably wasn't there coming off a championship.
No, and especially to get to second actions if something doesn't work. Like, I do think they would just go to the matchup a lot, and then if it worked, great. If it didn't, and with the down shooting that we talked about, it didn't work as often as it did a year ago. And, the isolation numbers are still really good for them. Tatum's been amazing there. Sometimes I think they actually suffered earlier this year from not just letting Tatum cook and run the show and having him out to the side, or maybe Brown's running things and gets to play a full first quarter and Tatum's coming off the court. That was a little something I was watching over a 7-10 game stretch there in January.
Mhm.
Tatum gets taken out of the mix when something like that happens. And, they're a tough shot hitting team. A lot of the way
They
they
are.
exploit mismatches. And, there was one play I was watching, I think the Lakers game, I want to say, with, I was watching some game with Law Murray, and he was just pointing out, or, one of the mismatches with the big out on Tatum, like one of the step back threes he hit over him. And it's like, yeah, that's a mismatch. That's an isolation right there, but that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Some of the shots that they're hitting and some of the ways that they get their offense. So it makes sense that it came down to earth a little bit, maybe without being as urgent, without being as locked in, without being able to get to some second, third actions if things don't
Yeah.
work. You are just kind of lining up a mismatch and having four guys watch. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, and
And
maybe
I
that's
and I think
impacting your defense too.
from a Cavs standpoint, like I think that is the way that they have to play it too, right? Like, and
You got to
that's why.
switch some. You
Well,
got to
yeah,
switch some.
they are going to switch, but I don't think they're going to send doubles. I don't think they're going to overhelp and whatnot. And I think sometimes when they're you're playing with Niang or Merrill out there, you're kind of baited into that help, and that's going to result in those wide open shots. I think they're just going to live with it, man. Like when you look at the matchup data, like Tatum getting those switches onto Garland, like that is clearly, a situation where Tatum's going to be able to get a decent look. But I think from a Cavs standpoint, they're going to continue to live with that. Darius has actually contested more Jason Tatum shots than anybody else in the league. He's defended 24 shots already this year in 8 minutes of being matched up against them. But Tatum's shooting 37% on those looks. Like, I expect Tatum to be a little bit better. But if he's taking mid range shots over Darius Garland, I'll live with that. You know, I will live with him working to get the screen, taking those mid-range shots, two pointers over Darius. Over, all right, we're over helping because we have a size mismatch here, right? And because of that, Tatum's going to kick out to an open shooter. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to live with those isolation shots in a mismatch over wide open catch and shoot looks. And I really think that is what you have to live with. And, I think some games Tatum's going to hit a bunch of those, others he's not. But, I just think from a Cavs standpoint, that's all you really can do.
Yeah, it's just so tough when you have to contain him and Brown. And obviously they did a good job with Tatum early, and Brown made a ton of tough shots and just brought them out of their own offensive hole. And that's often how it goes with them. But I do think it's at least a little ingenuity to try to do things differently against them, play some single coverage and not just allow those kickouts like almost every team does. And, it still
Yep.
brings me back to Chris Mannix. I had him on talking about the finals, and he's just like, there were guys on the Dallas side who were just like, why are we triple teaming Tatum in the post on his drives and allowing him to kick out to Sam Hauser and Drew Holiday and all these guys for just practice shots? And so many teams do that against them. I know it's a tough
The
pick your
roster's too
poison kind
talented,
of
man.
thing, but
Yeah,
it's too talented.
and
I
against
mean,
most
teams
teams,
leave Porzingis open in the pick and pop all day long. That's why he
Yeah.
shot 50% in January.
Yep. No, I totally agree, man. Like Boston's just not a team you can do that against. And I think sometimes players have to fight that because in most matchups, send a quick double, blitz, force, a bad decision or a rush decision and, kind of show and recover and whatnot. You can't do that against Boston. There is too much talent. There's too much IQ on the team. And I think one of the biggest trappings and one of the biggest mistakes people make when they talk about Boston, like they just talk about them as a high volume 3-point shooting team and whatnot. My takeaway from Boston last year winning the championship was the importance of playmaking. When you have five guys that are at the very least a secondary initiator in the offense, the optionality that you have, the offensive versatility, your ability to take advantage of whatever the defense is throwing at you just goes through the roof. And I think the playmaking intelligence of Boston is always my biggest takeaway when I watch them. So you have to play them straight up. You have to live with, all right, they're going to be able to generate some mismatches and take those shots. Don't break your shell defensively. And I thought in particular, the one big minutes when it was either Mobley and Niang or Jared Allen and Niang, I thought they broke their shell defensively. They gave up open shots to Porzingis. They were scrambling. They were over helping. And I thought, the defensive integrity of the Cavs broke down in those spots.
Yeah, defensive rebounding in that first half too, just not good enough. It wasn't a good enough Cavs effort, and you can say, oh, guys are going to come back, and I do think that's going to help if they can get to full health. But that's
The
part of
guys that
the
were there need to
calculus
be
here.
better. The guys that
Yeah,
were there need to be
exactly.
better. And, they might get, healthier or I sure hope they'll get healthier, right? Like Dean Wade was practicing. Apparently, the swelling in his knee is largely subsided. So I'm excited to see that. Donovan Mitchell's questionable for tonight. I don't know if he's going to play after that shot he took from Horford. But I don't think it's anything too serious. But, the most important thing, like to me, it still just comes down to Mobley. Like he's got to be better in this matchup. Garland needs to be better. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline. I kind of expect some activity from the Cavs now at this point. But
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So we're
but
21 hours to go. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, my point is, as much as you do to supplement the core, it's going to come down to those star guys. The best players on the Cavs need to be better if they're going to have a chance at contesting Boston and trying to advance to the finals.
The deadline's going to be really interesting tomorrow. It's already gotten wackier than I can ever remember it. But first, want to shout out Prize Picks here. There's a big game on Sunday after the deadline. Deadline week coming in line with the Eagles Chiefs game on Sunday here. And whether it's basketball you love or you're gearing up and want to have some guys playing for something here in this game, Prize Picks, your daily fantasy sports resource for the big game on Sunday, is giving you a Patrick Mahomes free square. You don't need it, but they're giving it to you, and all you need is 0.5 passing yards to hit on that square. So 2 or more players, one of them can be Mahomes, and that free square pick more or less on their stat projections, and you have your team for the big game on Sunday. Saquon Barkley, 112.5 yards. That's a high one, but I like it. Jalen Hurts, 215.5. Travis Kelce all the way down the line. Ton of stars in this game. This was a massive shootout a couple years ago when these teams played each other, so it should be a fun one to play around with on Prize Picks. And if you go over there right now, you can get that Pat Mahomes free square along with 50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup with the code CLNS. Head over there, play a $5 lineup, get $50 instantly with code CLNS. Prize Picks, run your game. So I haven't seen your reaction, Justin, just because I've been consuming a million different reactions to it. Are you just with everybody else on the Luka thing? This is the dumbest thing in the world and makes no sense, and Dallas is idiotic.
Here's what I'll say. I thought Tim McMahon actually did a good job of summing it up. Where he was saying how he's talked to some GMs that say they could understand wanting to get out of the Luka business, but not maximizing the return was kind of the biggest thing, and that's largely where I'm at. The stuff about him re-injuring the same calf 4 times in 3 years and not rehabbing it properly, like, I get why that's scary because, I'm about a year removed from tearing my Achilles. Like, I know what that happens. Like, if you're neglecting your health in that way, it's going to be difficult. And I think it's also worth,
Especially ahead of 350, right? That was going to be the extension.
yeah. And I think this is maybe something that under the old CBA, maybe it's just a no-brainer that you extend Luka. But now that it's so punitive and you have to really worry about allocating your money, maybe you do worry that his health is going to fall off, not taking his condition seriously or whatever the case may be. But like when you hear the reports about like more was offered and they managed to find a way to negotiate down or whatever, like no. You have to maximize this return. Like if you're going to do something this bold, you have
So
to
what
maximize
would
that
it have
return.
looked like? That's what I'm
Like
wondering. Like, what would have been a package people were like, this is fine?
so I guess like if you are saying we want to make the most of our window now, we have to get, the best player that we can trade for. I can understand Anthony Davis. Obviously, like I would be more inclined to say go a long-term route. Can you get J-Dub from OKC with 1 billion picks and like Hardenstein or something like that? If you can, like I would favor that. But if you're going with a concession of we want the best player that we can trade for, Anthony Davis is probably that guy. I get it. I don't when you have questions about reliability and your answer is we're going to build around Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, I'm going to raise my eyebrow a little bit. But if you are going to move him to the Lakers, like you need to get, Dalton Connect in there. You need to get both first round picks. Like if it's Anthony Davis, Connect, Max Christie, and both first round picks and whatever swaps they're able to offer or whatever, do that. Why on earth did you include a second round pick in addition to Luka Doncic? Like, even from
Or not get 31.
Are you even like from a seriousness standpoint, you have to be sitting there and look Rob in the eye and be like, are you really not going to do this deal if we don't include a second round pick? Like, I'm baffled by that. Like, it's the smallest little detail, but to me, like, it indicates this wasn't thoroughly enough vetted.
Yeah, especially since they are in the driver's seat there, you would think. Now,
Yeah.
again, I feel like there's a lot we don't know here, especially on the Luka front, because we can do all the basketball analysis here that we want. I think it is indisputable that the business, culture, fan base, all those aspects, even the team itself, who obviously got shell shocked by this. Kyrie, I'm sure. Again, the role change here. I'm looking at that and I'm like, how's he going to react to that? How's he even going to fulfill that? Like, you put him in a completely different place on this roster now. Davis, obviously, this probably completely caught him off guard, and now he's in a different place. And how's he reacting? Like, there's just such a human element to this, and business element, and just so much to consider beyond. Is this a good trade? Is this the right move? Cap, whatever implications they were thinking about here, and it just feels like Nico Harrison kind of put the blinders on and was like, let me just look at like what we're doing with the cap and the style of the team that we're playing with here, and maybe some frustrations that we have with Luka, and forget everything else on the outside, because the reason you don't trade a guy like Luka is valid, right? Like, they alienated the fan base here.
Carter made
like,
such a smart point about this on our podcast last night. But like, as much as the number one goal is to win a championship, reality is sports are an entertainment industry. And I would argue that your number one goal is getting your fan base engaged. The way Philly was able to engage their fans throughout the process, like, hey, we're doing something for the long term, but like here's something you can get invested in. I didn't love it. Like
I had Tim Cato on yesterday, and he said he doesn't think a championship would fix some of the alienation that
that's
they
like
created
when
here.
you have to give your fan base things to care about. You have to consider, their wants and needs to some extent. And like,
This would be
you
like
can,
the Cavs trading LeBron in like 07 or 08.
yeah, yeah. And like, honestly, without warning, like to me, that's the biggest thing. Like, you almost have to lay the groundwork here of like rumors, let's
See what the
get this
reaction's going to be.
get this conversation. Well, not even that, like attempt to sour the market on him even beforehand. When you just blindside like the basketball world with this, there's no way that, people are going to understand. Like it's such a tough situation. And like,
And
I
it
get the
happens at
argument.
midnight. Like, you can imagine kids waking up crying. It's bizarre. It
My
really
sleep
is.
hasn't
Like,
recovered. My sleep hasn't
yeah.
recovered since. I stayed up like half that night, like just looking at what's going on, man. Like, and I don't care about Dallas. Like, this is it's unbelievable. And I understand. Maybe there is an argument for that from a basketball standpoint. They're going to be better this year, particularly like if Lucas Calf isn't going to be 100% or whatever. Sure, you're a better defensive team. Max Christie's shown some stuff. If you can add a ball handler, maybe you're able to. But I didn't think that they were a championship contender this year with Luka. I don't think that they're one with Anthony Davis. I think that they were pretty fortunate to make the NBA Finals, and when they made the NBA Finals, it was pretty clear that Boston was just an higher tier above them. Like I didn't think that they were particularly close. So I don't
of
think that
course
this is a roster you go all in on.
I, of course, am intrigued by the basketball aspect of it, though, because I do love Davis. I do like a lot of the pieces here. I do think they could get back to the finals. I just think it puts a lot on Kyrie at this stage of his career. Not to mention Clay, who's just in another part of his career at this point.
Kyrie can't be the only initiator. He can't. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Kyrie can't be the only initiator. Like he's
You
very
can
good
just
playing off
imagine
a hub,
teams
but
taking
like,
him out and you're daring someone else to beat you.
yeah. Yeah,
And that's what the Celtics did to Luka in the finals, and Kyrie wasn't even able to overcome their defense then. And now he's going to be taking all that defensive pressure. So, man, it's a baffling situation. Obviously, we're going to talk about it for a long time. Do you expect much on the Cavs front deadline-wise, or just what else intrigues you around the league heading into tomorrow?
I think that they're going to be players. I think they're going to be looking for significant upgrades to see, basically thoroughly vetting every option that's available to them.
What do they need?
I think, well, one, a 4-3 or 3-4 would be ideal because we should not be this reliant on Dean Wade. And I think Dean Wade is a very good player, but I really do think, like, when you look at kind of the splits of when he's there and when he's not, I think that's more reflective of
My boss
behind it.
always laughs at me, John, when he's like, I go into the game and I'm like, Dean Wade's out, the Cavs are in trouble. And he's just like, Dean Wade, but it's true.
But so much of that, I think, is who's behind him. Like in the past, it was, okay, Dean's out, we're playing Lamar Stevens. Like, love Lamar, but that's, that's not a viable option here. George Niang, I really, really like him. He's done a lot to get in better shape, but this is a really tough matchup for him. I think a big part of it too is when he's been out, a lot of other guys have been out, and that's kind of you've added some noise to it. But adding a 3-4 or 4-3 would be, primarily my goal. Maybe adding a backup 5 would be great. I do think that there's enough smoke that I think that there's a real chance that the Cavs land DeAndre Hunter. So that's kind of the name that I'm keeping an eye on. But we'll see what they do. Maybe they're not able to pull off something and they just do a smaller move to get out of the luxury tax and give themselves the full mid-level exception, like moving on from Sam Merrill or something like that to do so. So we'll see what they do.
Yeah, Hunter would be a heist, I think, especially with the year he's had. I think he's probably had one of the seasons this year that hasn't been talked about enough.
I loved him in the offseason. Yeah.
It's ridiculous what he's doing efficiency-wise off the bench there in Atlanta, and they do need someone like that. Health's a concern there, but I feel like he's been relatively healthy this year, and Atlanta's going in the wrong direction. So it's going to be crazy tomorrow. I feel like.
Yeah, like plus if you're moving Karis LeVert, who, is coming back from a right wrist injury. I think he's been pretty hesitant to shoot since he's been back. Like, he's not been the most durable player either. So I think
No.
Atlanta finding a way to manage his minutes has been big, and I don't think the Cavs would be asking him to play, 35 minutes a night because, Donovan's playing 30. So I think that they'd be in a position to really kind of maximize it. So that's probably the top of my wish list right now, at least from a realistic standpoint. If Kobe wants to surprise me, go ahead, but I would love to see DeAndre Hunter on this team.
Yeah, Celtics could use some forward help too, especially if Hazard's going to be in and out a little bit. They're not going to get something significant here, obviously. Now, the big prize, I think, for them would be someone I think the Cavs had a little interest in over the summer, Gershon Yabusele.
Yep.
Love what he's done in Philly. Maybe even would help the Cavs a little bit with some of their front court depth if they could go get him too. I think everyone should be in the Gershon Yabusele business the way he's played for Philly.
Yeah, and you got the connection there. Kenny Atkinson coached him for Team France. I think we were hoping that would be a factor. I saw that they have interest in Torrey Craig on the buyout market. That would be a good one. They keep getting connected to Ben Simmons as a buyout team.
Ben Simmons?
Yeah, I would prefer that not being the case. But I guess I get it as like a low risk flyer. But yeah, I think they're going to be active looking at options on the trade market. They're going to be active in the buyout market, so it'll be interesting to see what they do.
All right, he's Justin Rowan. Always appreciate having him here. I didn't even realize it, but Celtics Cavs going to play again later this month in Boston, so we'll see if they can both appear at full health or maybe new versions of themselves after tomorrow. We'll have some trade deadline coverage leading up to 3 o'clock, and then Celtics Mavs at the Garden, which I really hope we're able to see a fully healthy Mavs team out there after the big trade and get the first look at them with Anthony Davis. So we'll have post-game coverage of that here, as always, on CLNS and the Garden Report. And again, show our sponsors some love. Game Time, code CLNS, as well as Prize Picks, code CLNS over there as well. Thanks as always, Justin. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Bobby.